You are sitting in a room, and everything around you is objectively safe. There are no immediate dangers, no active crises, and no physical threats to your life. Yet, deep inside your body, your nervous system is operating as if you are standing in a war zone. Your chest feels tight, your breathing is shallow, and your mind is racing at high speeds, desperately scanning your environment for something to go wrong. If your life is fine, your brain will instantly pivot inward, fabricating hypothetical scenarios, past mistakes, or future disasters to justify the panic you feel. Pop psychology tells you that you are just an overthinker, and that you need to practice mindfulness to calm down. But these surface-level tips fail because they treat the symptom rather than the structural cause. This state of constant, exhausting readiness is called hypervigilance. It is a physical state where your primitive brain has hijacked your physiology, keeping your body locked in a permanent survival loop. To understand why your mind refuses to rest, we must look directly at the primary smoke detector of the human brain, the amygdala. This almond-shaped cluster of nuclei sits deep within the temporal lobes and is responsible for processing intense emotional responses, particularly fear and aggression. In a healthy state, the amygdala fires an alarm only when an actual physical threat appears and then quietens down once the danger passes. However, under conditions of chronic modern stress, hidden trauma, or severe digital burnout, the amygdala undergoes a profound structural shift. It physically enlarges and becomes hyperreactive. The neural threshold required to trigger its alarm drops to near zero. Once this boundary is breached, the amygdala enters a state of continuous firing, sending a relentless stream of panic signals to the rest of the brain, completely bypassing your rational mind before you even have a chance to think. The moment your hyperreactive amygdala fires, it instantly alters your physical state via the autonomic nervous system. This system is split into two opposing branches: the sympathetic nervous system, which drives your fight-or-flight response, and the parasympathetic nervous system, which governs rest and digestion. In a state of chronic hypervigilance, the sympathetic nervous system is permanently activated while the parasympathetic brake is completely disabled. This creates a severe physiological imbalance. Your body is flooded with a continuous low-grade stream of adrenaline and noradrenaline. Your heart rate baseline increases, your muscles retain constant physical tension, and your digestion slows down. Your physiology is prepared for intense, explosive physical exertion to fight off a predator, but because you are simply sitting at a desk or staring at a screen, this massive survival energy has nowhere to go, transforming into an internal state of raw, unprovoked dread. When your body is continuously flooded with adrenaline, your higher cognitive centers experience a severe analytical crisis. The prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for logic and reasoning, cannot tolerate a massive mismatch between how your body feels and what your environment looks like. If your heart is racing and your chest is tight, your logical brain assumes there must be a dangerous reason for it. To resolve this cognitive dissonance, the prefrontal cortex actively begins to search your memory and your future timeline to find a threat that matches your physical panic. It will take a minor awkward comment from a coworker 3 days ago, or a vague worry about your finances next month, and magnify it into a catastrophic emergency. Your mind is not overthinking because it is broken. Your mind is overthinking because it is desperately trying to invent a logical explanation for the physical stress chemicals already floating through your blood. The continuous activation of your survival circuits triggers a secondary, highly destructive chemical pathway known as the HPA axis. This circuit commands the adrenal glands to release cortisol, the body's primary long-term stress hormone, directly into your system. Under normal ancestral conditions, cortisol spikes rapidly to help you survive an emergency and then clears out of your tissues within hours. But in a hypervigilant brain, the cortisol faucet is left slightly open, causing a continuous toxic bleed. High baseline levels of cortisol act as a neurotoxin inside the hippocampus, the brain's primary hub for memory consolidation and context tracking. As the hippocampus experiences this chemical erosion, it loses its ability to accurately distinguish between a past memory of danger and your current safe reality. The brain loses its context filters, causing your past anxieties to bleed directly into your present moment. To understand how hypervigilance alters your literal perception of sensory data, we must look at a structure called the thalamus. The thalamus acts as the grand central station of the human brain, sorting every single piece of sensory information from your eyes, ears, and skin, and deciding which data is important enough to send to your conscious mind. In a normal state, the thalamus filters out 99% of background noise so you can focus. But when the amygdala signals constant danger, it commands the thalamus to open its sensory gates entirely. This causes an overwhelming influx of raw data into your consciousness. Every sudden background noise, every shift in someone's facial expression, and every minor physical sensation in your own body is flagged by the thalamus as highly dangerous. You become hyperreactive to your environment because your brain has lost its sensory filters, forcing you to consciously process every minor detail. Deep within the brainstem lies a tiny nucleus called the locus coeruleus, which serves as the principal site for the synthesis of norepinephrine in the central nervous system. This tiny structure acts as the brain's physiological arousal switch. When you are asleep, the locus coeruleus is completely quiet. When you are focused, it fires at a stable rhythm. However, in a hypervigilant state, the locus coeruleus becomes locked in a state of hyperarousal, firing erratically and continuously. This constant bathing of the cortex in norepinephrine completely eliminates your brain's ability to experience a state of calm. It keeps your cognitive focus permanently fragmented, forcing your attention to constantly dart from one thought to another. You find yourself completely unable to engage in deep work or relaxed conversation because your brainstem is continuously telling your cortex that a crisis is happening right now. As hypervigilance forces your primitive brain centers to operate at maximum capacity, your highest evolutionary achievement, the prefrontal cortex, begins to experience functional downsizing. The human brain operates on a highly strict metabolic budget, and running an active survival response requires an immense amount of glucose and oxygen. To conserve energy during what it perceives as a prolonged crisis, the brain systematically limits blood flow to the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for abstract planning, working memory, and emotional regulation. This leaves you trapped entirely within your lower survival brain. Your ability to think long-term, rationalize your fears, and control your impulses is structurally degraded. The tragic paradox of hypervigilance is that the longer your brain spends obsessing over survival, the less cognitive power you have available to actually manage the demands of your daily life. The relentless chemical signaling of a hypervigilant brain completely devastates the architecture of human sleep. Under healthy conditions, the brain must experience a steep drop in core body temperature, a reduction in heart rate, and a complete silencing of norepinephrine pathways to transition into deep, restorative, slow-wave sleep. But when the locus coeruleus and the amygdala are firing continuously, your brain refuses to fully disarm its defenses, even when you drop into unconsciousness. It keeps you in a state of light, highly fragmented sleep, frequently waking you up at the slightest sound. Furthermore, this chronic neurochemical arousal severely limits your time spent in REM sleep, the precise stage where the brain processes emotional trauma and resets its stress thresholds. By depriving you of restorative rest, hypervigilance ensures that you wake up with your stress receptors already saturated, trapping you in a vicious cycle. The agonizing nature of hypervigilance must be analyzed through the lens of a massive evolutionary mismatch. For hundreds of thousands of years, human dangers were immediate, physical, and short-lived, such as a predator attack or a sudden tribal conflict. The fight-or-flight response was perfectly engineered to handle these acute crises because it ended quickly, either through survival or death, allowing the nervous system to return to a baseline of deep rest. In the modern world, our threats are abstract, invisible, and permanent, such as financial anxiety, career uncertainty, and a continuous stream of global bad news. Your ancient survival circuits do not know how to handle an abstract threat that never ends. They treat a difficult email or a financial worry with the exact same physical intensity as a physical predator, locking your biology into an endless survival response for a danger that cannot be fought or run away from. When the brain maintains a state of hypervigilance for months or years, the psychological stress inevitably transforms into a heavy somatic burden across the entire physical body. The continuous contraction of muscles driven by sympathetic arousal leads to chronic pain in the neck, shoulders, and jaw, a condition known as somatic guarding. Concurrently, the chronic elevation of stress hormones disrupts the delicate lining of the gastrointestinal tract and alters the gut microbiome, leading to systemic inflammation and digestive distress. The body is effectively being forced to run a high-intensity engine without ever changing the oil or allowing the metal to cool. This physical degradation is not a separate illness. It is the direct, downstream consequence of a brain that refuses to turn off its survival alarms, sacrificing the long-term health of your physical organs to prioritize an imaginary battle that never arrives. Ultimately, chronic hypervigilance and low-grade dread must be reframed not as a psychological defect, but as a masterpiece of evolutionary engineering. Your brain is an ancient organic survival machine performing a highly precise defensive calculation based on a hyper-reactive alarm system. The continuous tension behind your eyes, the racing thoughts, and the constant scanning for disaster are definitive proof that your amygdala, your locus coeruleus, and your sympathetic nervous system are fully operational, working exactly as nature intended to ensure you survive a crisis. By stripping away the layer of personal frustration and analyzing this internal friction through the cold clarity of neurobiology, the structural reality of your mind becomes entirely clear. Your brain is not broken. It is simply overprotecting you in a world it was never evolved to understand. This concludes our deep diagnostic investigation into the physical anatomy of hypervigilance.